the students started giving the teachers feedback that trickled back to us. And some of the things that we heard was it was transforming the culture of the classroom, because not only were the students recognizing the good in themselves with the few activities we provided, they were starting to recognize the good in each other.
Welcome to Raising Grace. In this episode, I'm so excited because once again, you'll notice I'm starting to bring in, as I said, the sisters. So we've had Mother Mater Veritas, Sister Thomas Aquinas, Sister Mary Bethany, and Sister Maria Carroll joined us. And here I've got, actually, once again, I'm going to let you all introduce yourself, okay?
Well, I'm Sister Miriam, and I'm currently a high school science and chemistry teacher. Prior to entering the convent, I was involved in a lot of youth ministry, but I also got my pharmacy degree and worked as a pharmacist for a couple of years. And I love teaching high school. I'm passionate about it and enjoy being with the kids and looking forward to future years.
So years ago when we did a concert, Unite Disciples of Christ, she was our MC, and you also played in a band too, right? Yeah.
Yes, I have multiple bands.
That's right. In many years, she's taught on the West Coast, so and that's in beautiful areas of the country. So
very beautiful.
We're not envious of her. But,
no,
we're happy that
you need to come and visit.
I know, that's true. That's true. Okay, sister.
I'm Sister Athanasius. I have taught in various capacities at this point, but most of my work has been with Sister John Dominic here at our Openlight Media apostolate. So I'm often sitting behind the camera, giving some direction, writing scripts, doing some of the publishing work and layout and things like the Virtue Field Guide. So
we appreciate all you do, sister.
Thanks. It's been great, and I'm here to serve your great work.
It's a
partnership. So yeah.
So this may be the first time some of you are watching. So I didn't think maybe you should reintroduce yourself. They may be like, well, who's the sister in yellow?
Yes. I'd like to say welcome to Sister Athanasius and Sister Miriam.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Karen Villa. I'm a clinical neuropsychologist who has been working off and on with Sister John Dominic for a number of years, and we were raised in Grace Made for Wholeness together, and it's been kind of a project in collaborating how virtue is Catholic social-emotional learning.
Exactly, and then we're continuing to walking through the Raising Grace developmental timeline, the beauty of gradualness as we're talking. And this particular section, we're really in this area about virtues, and we know that, happiness is living the virtuous life. And developmentally, when we work with high school students, there's different ways in which you're actually going to teach the little ones. So we invited Sister Miriam and another sister, Sister Catherine Thomas. They had a little bit of a discussion about how to use this wonderful Virtue Field Guide and give you a little bit more background on it. So we're going to watch that now, and then we'll be right back.
Hello and welcome. I'm Sister Catherine Thomas here with Sister Miriam, who contributed to the Virtue Field Guide. Sister, why did y'all write this book, and why Field Guide?
Sister, I'm really excited about this book. And the reason why I decided on a field guide theme is because what do you think of when you're thinking field guide? You're thinking of somebody who's wandering through the wilderness, trying to find their way. And in a similar way, this field guide is pointing the reader towards their end or their purpose, which is union with God through virtuous living. And this was meant to be super practical, a practical guide with practical tips that someone in high school could implement in their lives in order to grow in their relationship with God. And so another thing, which I don't know if you've heard of, is our Virtue Strength Survey, a special survey that students can take in order to discover what their virtue strengths are and what are potential areas of growth. So when students take that survey, partnered together with this book, they really do have some amazing tools to be able to grow in virtuous living.
Sister, could you tell us more about the content of the book? Does it cover the cardinal virtues?
Yes, actually there's over 40 virtues covered in the book. And
Excellent.
They're categorized according to the 4 cardinal virtues. And we've also included the 3 theological virtues in the book.
So what does the book provide for each virtue?
So for each virtue, we have first the definition so that the student can grow in their intellectual understanding of the virtue. Then we have a prayer because we know we need the Lord's grace to help us to grow in virtuous living. Then there's a scripture passage which is tied to each virtue, which the student can meditate on, spend time reflecting. And then following that, we have journaling questions and discussion questions. And this helps the student to just look at their own lives and see where they might be doing well, practicing the virtue, and what areas they might need to grow in, and to actually set specific goals for themselves on how they're going to improve in virtue.
I noticed that there were a lot of maps and pictures of plants and animals in the field guide. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, we place the content of this guide within the context of a traveler's guide. And so the student is traveling around the world and they're encountering saints from particular continents and countries, as well as animals and species that have characteristics of or exhibit qualities of the virtue that they're learning about.
Can you tell us some of the ways that we can use the book?
So many ways. Like, there's not a set way, sister. This could be useful, for example, if you're on a retreat with students and you want them to be able to have something to look at and meditate on. You could take them to the chapel and provide them with that quiet space with the Lord, the Blessed Sacrament, for journaling there. You could use this book in your classroom if you're interested in having a bell ringer type activity. When the students come into class, they could open up the book, turn to a certain page, be reflecting on that virtue. My high school does a Virtue of the Week program, so the whole school is actually considering the same virtue over the course of 2 weeks in order to try to improve in that virtue together as a student body. And so there's multiple various ways, and as I've already said, you could use this with the Virtue Strength Survey in order to know what specific virtues to focus on for improvement.
Sister, that sounds amazing. One last question. Big picture, why is it worthwhile to work on virtue?
Well, ultimately, virtuous people are happy in their lives, and they also have a deeper relationship with our Lord, and we're made for union with God, so it's worthwhile to be headed in that direction. People who are virtuous tend to have very healthy relationships, their friendships and their marriages based on virtue, and also that when we are living virtuously, we're also respecting the dignity of each other, of other humans and people that we encounter in our lives. And so definitely worthwhile, sometimes not easy, but we need resources and tools to help us along the way, and this virtue guide provides a good guidance for young people in today's culture.
Well, sister, it definitely is worthwhile to grow in virtue, and you all have put together a resource that is beautiful and so practical.
Yeah, thank you, sister. This book is now being offered on Openlight Media, and we really hope you enjoy using this resource.
Thank you so much, sister. It looked like you two had a little bit of fun doing that.
We almost have too much fun when we're
I know. We
together.
There's probably more outtakes than there's actual.
We were laughing and making jokes.
So this whole idea, so there's one thing that you noticed when Sister gave the introduction, she talked about, like, this is kind of this understanding of a wilderness. So when we began our discussions, we've really entrusted all of this work in Raised in Grace to Our Lady of Champion. And Our Lady of Champion, which is also known as Our Lady of Good Help, is the only Marian shrine in the United States that's approved. And this is in Wilderness. In the Wilderness, well, not now, but at the time, it was in the Wilderness in Wisconsin. And she says part of her mission is to teach the children in this vast wilderness all that they need to know for salvation. And virtues is a way of life, and they're on walking on that path. So kind of pulling on that same understanding of wilderness is we have the Virtue Field Guide. So we're going to give you a little bit of behind the scenes of how this came about. And who wants to go first between the two of you? Because this has been a group collaboration.
Yes.
But we've talked about it in detail. But what you didn't hear is all the Sister Athanasius did in making this actually happen. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Sister Miriam and her team did such great work with it, Sister Dominic, that when it came across my desk, I'm like, I want the formatting and to be as cool as and accessible as the content is, to really highlight the gift that this is to anyone that wants to live the virtues fully, whether it's adults, students. And so as I was looking at it, it was like, this is actually, because it's got such a consistent setup, it's a lot like a field guide. And maybe I'm a nerd like that, but I kind of love field guides. Like, I'll go look up what the birds are at the mother house and things like that. It's just, and this is, I mean, if we put that much into a guide for birds, what about how much more should we be doing for the virtues? And so our design team actually, one of our lay staff, Hannah, who's not here right now, pitched the idea of, well, what if we did like an animal tied to each virtue? There's 7 virtues, 7 continents, right? And at first I said, that sounds weird. But as we thought about it, it was actually a really cool way to bring it to life. And that's what I love about the final resulting design, is there's so much life in it, because the virtues are something that are lived. They're not just a knowledge you have in your head. It's something that enables you to function in the world in a new way, which, I mean, you really did do an amazing job with coming up with all the ways that it can be enacted in the life of a teen.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I love the wilderness theme, because seeing kids in high school, they have so much coming at them.
They really do.
And trying to sort out what is true and what is good and what is beautiful. And they need direction on that. So to be able to point them towards what is good and true and beautiful in really specific, practical ways, which we brainstormed together, the sisters. We brainstormed in the car when we were driving, when we were traveling. We brainstormed at school, seeing them in action and observing them and giving them little tips. Hey, you know how you could be better in foresight is you let your teacher know that you have a baseball game and you're going to be missing class. I mean, really specific that they could work on so they could get better in that.
So it's that understanding that the sisters talked about previously about the looks like, sounds like that we have for the little ones, where there's, because we know the cartoon drawings may not have applied here, you know,
Right.
but it's really kind of the practical looks like, sounds like of daily living. And then we also, with this, again, looking at this developmental timeline, I mean, how does this reinforce all that we know about the neuroscience and how they're developing, you know, maturing?
Well, I guess I would say a couple of things that, you know, when we talk about the psychological tasks of adolescence, it's really answering that question, who am I? And there's such great reflections you wrote throughout the book that help young people to answer that question, you know, to really spend time contemplating who am I in God's kingdom, and then for students who they are to each other. So they're learning the brain fundamentals of insight and empathy, which match the cardinal virtues of prudence and justice. And so this is such a great support to developing those brain fundamentals over time to help them transition into young adulthood. And then the second thing I would say is that they really are in a wilderness right now. There's such a teen mental health crisis, and they do have so much coming at them. And, you know, we used to take depression and anxiety as just a natural part of growing up. And this helps them to enter into those, you know, fears of growing up, the difficulties of growing up, and reflect and figure out who they are and how to, you know, manage their emotions and their dysregulation through virtue.
I love that, because when we think about, you know, what the emotions and the feelings, what the virtues do, we're talking about this being body and soul, the virtues really take up, you know, the emotions and the feelings are taken up in virtue, and this gives direction for all that kind of chaos that you may be experiencing, right?
Such a different perspective
And there's
just contemplate those emotions in the context of virtue.
And the compass on it. So I, you know, and I know, and sister, I know you put everything together. I mean, when you look at this, I mean, there's just like adorable places where there's a frog, you know. And then when you look at the whole section, you know, you may be familiar. What's that movie with the sloth, you know? So we have with the whole thing with the
various,
I
don't know, let me see if I can find that. That's page 30. That is my favorite page from the book. It's the sloth chart.
Nice. Very good. Look at that.
But there's a little bit
because with all the social media and cell phones, there's such a tendency towards the CDS. So that's so helpful.
So you see the understanding, this kind of this, like you said, this overstimulation and this fragmentation that's taking, and really what the virtues do. It brings this integration, you know. And I think another thing when you talked about like who I am, and one thing we've worked on as well, and I know you've had some conversations, both of you have talked to teachers, or you've talked to students that have taken a virtue strength survey that we've developed, which Sister Athanasius, again, I'm so happy she's in front of you now, because she's kind of usually behind the scenes, you know, and developing the survey that you can discover, you know, what virtues you're strong at. So I know I'd love it if you all would both kind of share your experience that you've had with students. Yeah.
Well, I was doing the virtue strength survey just the other day with a group of high school students, and it was fun to watch them take the test. They saw the results, they get it ranked. What are their strongest areas of virtue, and which ones do they need to work on? And one girl, her first reaction was like, wow, this is awesome. This survey totally called me out. Like, she realized she needed to work on a lot of those things that were near to the bottom. But for them to also see what they're good at. And one of the boys that was there, he was not familiar with the term eutrapelia. He hadn't heard that word before. But it was one of his highest virtues. It
Could you
ranked high.
explain to our audience what that one is?
Yeah, eutrapelia is really being able to enjoy the moment, to contribute to a moment so that everyone is enjoying it. It's having a good
Being
humor.
around Sister Miriam. Okay, go ahead.
Is that your top?
That's her top
I love
virtue.
this one.
Okay.
What I say to high school students is, if you go to an event and come back and say, I'm bored, you need to work on this virtue.
I see.
Because you're not, are you a victim of your surroundings that you have to be constantly entertained? Or are you going to go to a family activity or a high school event or be in class and you're making it be awesome? You contribute so that everyone else is enjoying themselves. What can you bring to this scenario? So people with this virtue typically, they can be funny, they can just be good-spirited, and kind of just, people want to be around that.
That
so
joy.
This student, he didn't know that was his, he didn't know the word.
Okay.
But he saw it ranked up there. Eutrapelia, what's that? He looked in the Virtue Field Guide to read more about it. What's it mean? He's like, that's totally me. That's totally me. And students are deeply touched when you help them to understand what their virtues are, because it's about who they are.
Right.
Not
That's the
what
question
they do or what they
answering.
produce. It's about who they are. And it touches them very deeply.
No, it's that feedback of saying, like, this is who you are. So I know you also had another experience of some students, so if you want to share that as well.
Yeah, so it's been really a privilege to work on it, Sister John Dominic, because I was interfacing with the schools that were testing it out for us, because this thing is fully validated. I mean, we've run it through all this data that, like, analysis that I never dreamed I would be doing with my background. But the students started giving the teachers feedback that trickled back to us. And some of the things that we heard was it was transforming the culture of the classroom, because not only were the students recognizing the good in themselves with the few activities we provided, they were starting to recognize the good in each other and practice this thing called virtue spotting, where they were like, oh, you just practiced, thanks for calling me on to turn my assignment in. You were practicing, the word just left.
but think what that does, Sister Athanasius, to build up a capacity for perspective taking and empathy in a young person, which they completely need when they transfer out into the larger world. That's so cool.
And there's such a focus on negativity too, like all the negative things around us in the news. We almost have we're attuned to it, and especially I've been hearing with young people too, they don't feel safe. But if we can help them shift their perspective toward the things that are good around them, to make that the focal point, that's a real touch point for happiness, I would think.
And wasn't there you talk about this, there's a contagion that comes with the living this and understanding, what it is. And wasn't there a couple high schools where the students took it, and the next thing we knew, we had the faculty and staff saying, can we take this as well?
Yes, we definitely did.
It's the right kind of contagion, right?
Right, exactly.
There are many other contagions.
Something I've done is I'll be walking around campus at lunchtime, and I have the virtue book with me, and then I'll see a student I know, and I'll say, Would you like me to tell you about what virtue I've noticed in you?
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, so I'll be like, okay, you know what? You are so good. I'll be like, let me think about this. And I'm like, oh, you're so generous. I've noticed this about you. And the other students will come over and, Sister, can you tell me one about mine?
So she's a virtue teller, not a fortune teller, right? Yeah. You're seeing into their soul, into their hearts, and bringing it out, you know. And you actually, in the back of that, Sister, you had the great foresight, Sister put in the back of there, where you could have, when you're spotting the virtue in different people, and you can do your list, and you can personalize it. And what Sister did too, another thing that's so important, you know, and Dr. Villa can reinforce this, is that the questions there's questions, but we're hoping that you journal, right?
Yes.
I mean, talk about the importance of journaling to get these thoughts. I mean, you can talk about it from the brain perspective, but what you've seen.
Yeah, this taking the time, again from the Healthy Mind Platter, taking time every day to turn inward and reflect on your inner life. And so many of the questions, again, that you've constructed do that. But what we find from a neuroscience perspective is that when people take that time in and that time for reflection, the integrative fibers of their brain get built up. And what that means is the different parts of their brain are more connected and they talk to each other better. And that's really one of the ways that we define brain health.
So that's really
important.
actually something that's taking place. So we don't want to, you know, they talk about is that unless you use it, you lose it.
Right.
So we're helping you use it so you don't lose it, right? And
and again, in this information age, when young people are so distracted by bits of information, it's the last thing they're doing is turning inward to reflect, and it's contributing to the mental health crisis, I think.
And is that why, I mean, so you intentionally wanted writing this out, right? Yes.
Yeah,
So talk about,
So to give them space for the personal reflection. So for example, for the virtue of eutrapelia, I might have a student ask or consider in their own life, like, how do I approach family activities? What is my spirit what do I bring to my family activity? What do I personally do to set a specific goal for myself? How could I improve in just a little thing? Just maybe just leaving the phone behind. When I know my family, they would prefer that I'm not on my phone during this family event. Okay, I'm just going to leave it behind, and that's a way that I, in this moment, right now, can work on this virtue. And I also have discussion questions. So I have the journaling.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And that's more
Or
for like the
group.
personal reflection. And I thought they could be writing that down in a journal. And if they were in a setting where they're comfortable sharing those responses, maybe like in a discipleship type group setting, that could be shared. But I made a different kind of question, which is more discussion question, which I envisioned to be used. You could do that. It's less personal. So you could do that in a classroom and just say, hey, what are the ways what things might interfere in the practice of eutrapelia? What other virtues might be connected to eutrapelia? So it's like less personal, but they can still talk it out and make connections and work toward greater understanding of the virtue.
You did a really
fantastic.
great job too with open-ended questions. I noticed as I was going through, I'm like, there is no definite answer to this one. And some of the ones that were a little more moral, I don't even know the answer to that. But it's really great for the students to like really engage it and think about it and be able to discuss the pros and cons and things like that. So
What a great companion, the Virtue Survey. This is where I'm good and where I need to work on, and then the field guide to, again, answer this question of identity development. They work great together.
Right, that's right. And if our audience is here, if you're interested in taking the Virtue Strength Survey, you can come to our website, openlightmedia.com, and it's on Virtue Strength Survey, right? You just kind of
/VSS,
and then you can take it and discover it, and then the Virtue Field Guide is also available there. We're hoping to have these in high schools, and everywhere. I mean, this is just to be just anywhere you go, as you go and you're living life and walking through the wilderness of life, you can take it with you. So before we sign off, you two have really dug in, and you know this. If you had to pick like your highlight in there, if there's a certain animal or a plant or something, what would that be? Or virtue, what would that be?
Gosh. Oh, so highlight like animal, plant, virtue.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Well, I think you said you liked the acedia page.
I definitely,
right?
I love the acedia
That's
page.
a good one.
Some of the virtue overviews I contributed to those, where we have the map and it talks about the place and the people. It was definitely a highlight for me. This particular one where we put the Latin American Our Ladies, each country's
that.
devotion
Yes.
was just really special to show it. Like this is. It's in us too,
Yeah, it's
culturally.
so
It's not
beautiful.
just individual,
It's
but
just so
communally.
beautiful.
So
Yeah.
that definitely is a highlight for me.
What about you, sister?
You know, I really like the fortitude section that's set in Africa. And
Okay.
it highlights the Uganda martyrs.
Uganda martyrs,
Yeah.
yes.
And I just thought, and there's a picture there of one of the martyrs that one of our own sisters had
Right.
created. And so I think that's my favorite page, the fortitude section.
So thank you both so
Thank
much
you,
for joining us
sister.
and for all that
Thank
you have
you.
done. And this is exciting, right? So you're really, truly beginning to understand, like we've been giving you the theoretical understanding of virtue, but this is the practical, like day to day, and knowing that truly, that happiness is living a virtuous life.
Amen.
Yeah.